I saw the title of today's show is Christianity Worth Believing in? And one thing that I think needs to be established is what is Christianity? And in my research, what I've found is that there is no expression of Christianity in modern times that represents what it was originally supposed to be. So when people, atheists, skeptics, reject Christianity, they are not actually rejecting the true essence of Christianity. They are rejecting an illusion. And I just wanted to kind of discuss that today. And maybe if people knew what true Christianity really was, they'd be more willing to accept some parts of it or all of it.
I
Anthony, would you
cannot wait.
define true Christianity for me? What is true Christianity?
True Christianity, it should be defined as following the faith Jesus Christ established as he established it. And that is not what any modern Christian institution does. The Protestants and the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox, which are the main groups, there are others, obviously, not a single one of them follows the faith that Jesus Christ. I know a lot of people don't believe Jesus actually existed,
Okay,
but
all right. Well, forgive me, Anthony, but I'm going to draw you back. What is the faith that Jesus set into place originally? What's the genesis of the faith that Christ put down that is Christianity? What is that?
Christianity, according to Jesus Christ, is actually contained in the Gospels, and it is a way of life. It is not
Yeah,
necessarily a
okay.
set of
I'm
dogmas.
hearing adjectives. Look, I'm hearing adjectives. But what is it? What are the edicts? What does it say? What does it command?
Well, Christianity is about. Let me kind of express, unravel a little bit. It's about how to attain eternal life, and the way we do that is by our behavior on this earth, how we act towards other people. And according to Jesus, the way we do that is by one, loving God, and two, loving our neighbors. Now, I know atheists have a problem with the first one, but loving our neighbors, I think they can accept. And the way we do that is essentially through unselfishness and following what Jesus says the commandments of God are, which are pretty much the Ten Commandments minus the Sabbath.
Okay, Anthony, can someone be commanded to love someone else? Right? Thou shalt love the Lord your God with all of your heart. How do I make myself love God?
How do you? Well, it's something you would choose to do if that's how you feel. If you want to love God, you're supposed to
Wait a
love
minute.
God.
Should love be earned? I mean, where does that sense of love come from? If someone says, I command you to love me, thou shalt love the Lord thy God. How
Well,
do
when
you
we say
command someone
command,
to love you?
well, see, actually, God, if God was really commanding us, then we would do it. But really, God is giving us the choice, and we can either love God, and that's a choice we could make, or we could not love God, and we will experience the consequences of that action.
Okay, but understand how that sounds because this is the language of an abuser. Love me or I'll burn you. Love me or I'll condemn you. Love me or I'll reject you and harm may come to you. This is not a healthy model for love, right? I mean, love me or else doesn't sound like something that a truly benevolent deity, a father, would say to a child. That's fair, isn't it?
Actually, I think that it is a loving thing to do because what you're saying is, what God is saying is, if you love me, then this will be the result. But I'm not going to make you love me. And if you don't want to love me, then, there will be separation. And that's your choice, and you're free to make that choice. I think that's giving you the option, and that's perfectly loving. It's not forceful. It's not abusive.
It's a
So
command. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind. It's a command.
Yeah, and well, but it's not a forced action. It's something that God you know, says that we should do. But if we're not forced to do it, and if we don't do it, then there are consequences, and that's true of
What
all, even human.
what does whether or not I am forced to do it have to do with the fact that it's a command? He's saying, do it or else. Love me or else. We agree there. That's what he's saying, correct?
Yes, that is what's being said.
Do you
And
think that's something that we would accept in everyday life? Would you look at someone else and say, I command you to love me or else? Or, in fact, you may be
well,
harmed.
let's just take it to like the level of a father or an offspring relationship. I think we could. How would you feel? Said, okay, son, you can love me, and you get to stay in the house. But if you don't love me, I'm going to kick you out. Do you think that's an unfair thing to do?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we
Right.
disagree there because
I
Why
think,
should
look,
I?
that's, go ahead, Paul. Go ahead. I'm
I'm
used to
I'm
hosting
a
a show
father.
solo, and I've been
No,
chided
that's
before.
fine. But
Go
as
ahead.
a father, absolutely not. Would the taking care of any of my children is not contingent on any of their loving me. Is like that's way down the list. There have been many times when my children didn't love me for various reasons, and some of them deserve, some not deserved, absolutely. And like looking after, if I love them, then absolutely respecting those choices without giving them consequences just for my because I'm not feeling loved. That's ridiculous. And
well,
in no court could you walk into court and say, you know what, I didn't feed my kids for a week because they didn't love me, which I showed them. Like that's is that not scary, Anthony? Does that not sound terrifying?
I guess I was actually more thinking along the lines of more of an adult offspring as opposed to someone who can't take care of themselves. Let me put it
All
this
right.
way. Let's say there's a 50-year-old man with a 30-year-old son, and the father says, "Okay, son, if you can love me and we'll have a relationship, but if you choose not to love me, then there's not going to be a relationship there, and you're going to not experience. You're not going to inherit my wealth or whatever." Is that fair?
Okay. But
Anthony, is
that
that the
might be fair, but
consequence that you're speaking of,
yeah.
or do you believe in literal hellfire? What would the consequence be if, let's say, I don't obey the command to love God, which you say is true Christianity? If I don't do that, what's going to happen to me according to true Christianity?
Yeah, you will be separated from God at judgment.
And what will
hmm
happen to me after I'm separated from God?
Well, my guess is that I can't, obviously, I don't know with ontological certainty, but presumably there would be suffering as a result of that.
Okay, I
Okay, so
would
then your analogy
suffer.
did not hold. Then you understand your analogy didn't hold, right? Then it's not that it's not that my adult children have gone on to we parted ways amicably because we don't love each other anymore. You acknowledge that, right? Your analogies no we're back to Seth's mob analogy. It's like if you don't love me, boy, you sure got a nice place here, but shame if something were to happen to it, kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing. If there's a situation where you have a relationship with someone and you choose not to reciprocate, then there are consequences to that. And even in human relationships, I don't understand why it's an issue when God demands it.
Okay, well, the Bible tells us to be as little children. We're supposed to come to Jesus as little children. The entire Christianity model infantilizes us, right? Because he is the father and we are the children. We are helpless. We can't know the mind of God. We must rely totally on God. So I'm not sure that the adult child angle totally works. Secondly, I just don't understand why I don't love you would result in my suffering. Do you have any kids of your own, may I ask, Anthony?
I No, I don't.
Okay, well, let's say you had a
But I can imagine. Yeah,
son.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Your son, for whatever reason, and you don't have a relationship, right? Things are tumultuous. I don't know, and I don't care why. That's still your son. And your son, for some reason, does not love you. And you still care for that son. You still want to protect that son. You don't want to see harm come to your son. In any context, would you, as a father, look at that son and say, my son does not love me as I have commanded or expected. I'm going to then cover my son in gasoline and set them on fire. Does that seem like a moral
I,
outcome to you, a consequence to you?
I, I really don't think that's what God. I don't know. That's obviously
Depart
not
from
acceptable.
me, you who are cursed, into a lake of everlasting fire and damnation. That's a quote from the New Testament. It is a threat to those who do not follow God's command to love him. Love me or I'll burn you. A father setting a child on fire for noncompliance. Is that a moral model in any sense, including the God model?
Well, no, it's not. But there are other factors to be taken into consideration. And really, I want to say that I do believe that the way we express love towards God is through how we treat other people, because that's how Jesus made it clear we are to follow God, is through the second part of that commandment, which is to love our neighbor. So if you're someone who's not loving God and that is expressed as harming people, yes, there should be consequences for that, and they should result in you suffer for causing suffering.
Disagree.
So you don't think
I'm
criminals so you don't think criminals should be punished
I am
for
not a huge
harming
I am not a
people?
huge fan of I am not a huge fan of punitive justice. No, I feel like society should be protected from people who've done crimes, and that the consequences they currently. That's a whole separate conversation. That's a
It's a
whole
false
separate.
equivalence model. Someone who has committed an act, an illegal or a genuinely harmful act against another, is not the same as I just don't love you. That's totally different. And I
But
just
it
don't
comes
love
from
you
not
means
loving someone.
I should suffer. To me, this sounds ridiculous, and it sounds like an abuse model. It sounds like domestic abuse.
Well, the not love is expressed and defined as not loving your fellow humans and causing harm to them. See, Jesus told us not to steal, not to murder, not to lie, not to do this, that, and the other. These are things that harm people, and Jesus didn't want us to do them. So if you're doing those things and that's your expression of non-love, then yes, there should be consequences for that. And we can argue if the consequence is justified in its measure, but I don't think that. So
Well,
How do you
to
tie
you're
me,
talking
those
about
together? How
you're talking about earthly
go ahead,
punishment
Paul.
now. You're talking about earthly punishment now, which is fine. We can talk about that, but let's suppose that we have humans on Earth who are, because you seem to think that actions are the most important part here. There are non-Christian people who have had very, very good lives. They've loved people in an exemplary way. Their good far outweighed their bad. It seems like you want to score a system. So they've done all that stuff, but they didn't hear of Yahweh, or they believed in some other entity ahead of Yahweh, or just whatever, for whatever reason they didn't do that first part. You seem to think that that person is equally justified to have the suffering and the torture, right?
actually, no. And that's the interesting part. I actually think that my opinion, nobody has a 100% accurate belief in God because we can't know everything about
Okay,
God. So everyone's going to be
so you
wrong. Yeah, go ahead.
so you just you're entirely on a karma system, that you think that there is an afterlife, that there's an afterlife for everyone, whether they want an afterlife or not. Some have reward, some have torture or suffering, and that's entirely a karma system. So what did Jesus need to do? Why is he in that mix? Was he just here to tell us about the karma system?
Yes, actually, that is correct. Now, what actually, in my opinion, this is going to sound a little bit strange. Well, Well, here's some points I wanted to make. The Bible is not actually a Christian document inherently. Major Christian doctrines, such as the atonement, are not actually true. These are things that were invented by the early church much later. When you actually study what Christ taught, to me it seems like even if Christ hadn't come to earth to perfectly teach us the will of God, salvation would still be possible.
Right. This is actually what I'm trying to get to, is that it seems like in your model, even the notion of a creator God is superfluous. Is it not? It's basically, as long as we understood our biological empathy and acted on the biological empathy on a net positive basis, everything was going to play out as it should. So
yeah, you said
there's
net
no need,
positive.
or whatever the scoring system is. If it's you have to get an A minus, or I don't know what the score the you have to achieve, but whatever the achievable score that gets you in or out, doesn't seem like we needed a god for that, or any religion. It seems like you should be calling in. You should just be all out, just pitching empathy, and forget that first commandment entirely. You love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind. That doesn't seem like it's in play in your model. Is that right?
Well, it's necessary. In the reason Jesus gave it the way he did is because they're both part of the same. They're both two sides of the same coin. You're supposed to love God, but how do you do that?
No, you just
Through
told us.
loving your
You just
neighbor.
said that. You just said that we can all love our neighbors, and love a different God
That's
than
how you.
Yahweh.
Yeah, that's how you love God. That's how God. It isn't really so much God
Okay, but so
is like
if I'm loving my
you must
neighbor,
worship.
or Seth is, that we might accidentally be honoring God when we are empathetic and acting in kind ways.
Yeah, actually, I believe that's correct. I believe that there
Okay,
are
so
people
then
who are
what's the point?
non-Christians.
Then what's the point of
The
talking
point
about is
is,
Christian? You said that you're intrigued by the call. Is Christianity worth believing? And it seems like this now entire argument is Christianity is unneeded. It's superfluous. Christianity, unless you're calling to say Christianity is not worth believing in, even in the pure form that you know and that the other billions of Christians don't know.
well, Christianity is the perfect revelation of the truth. The other religions and philosophical systems aren't. So there are ways, but there is a chance that somebody could have accidentally came upon the truths of Christianity without Jesus. That is possible. But the point is we have faith in Jesus because we believe he's the one who's teaching us the perfect system of salvation. And that's why Christianity is necessary, because not all religions are the same. Christianity
Do
is
you
superior in its ethical moral system.
do you think that the golden rule started with Jesus?
No, but there are other things that Jesus taught us that basically it's how do we express that rule perfectly. And you can say love your neighbor as you love yourself, which many people have, including before Jesus, but what does it actually look like? Do we have a model that represents and teaches that with authority as ontological reality, as opposed to just a philosophical speculation?
Those don't seem
See what
like
I'm saying?
necessities. Those don't seem like necessities. Those just seem like, Christianity dressed it up nicer.
Well, it may not be a necessity, but what I'm trying to say is that we have more certainty in this as being the truth of the salvation of our souls because of Jesus than we would if Jesus wasn't there and we didn't place our faith in Jesus. Like if you had put your faith in Muhammad, you're going to get an entirely different model of how to behave on this earth, and it's going to lead to condemnation because you're not expressing the behavior in the way that God wants it. And and we can, I know that Muslims are going to get offended by that, but that's just the way I see. That's why Christianity, as opposed to the other religions, is worth.
You said love your neighbor as yourself is essentially the whole of the law. So I don't understand why a Muslim couldn't do that if they.
because when Muhammad taught that, he also, the corollary is that his model of behavior is how Muslims are supposed. He was the model. I forget the
Right, but
word for it in his.
certain Muslims can live entirely with, regardless of
So the
if
question is,
they may have wrong theological beliefs, but they may still love their neighbors themselves.
well, they wouldn't do that if they followed Muhammad, because I guess what I'm trying to say is that Jesus and Muhammad can both say love your neighbor, but how do we define that? How is it expressed? Jesus
All right,
expressed it in a different way than.
Seth, do you have anything else? I feel like we are now into some distinctions that make no difference to me.
No, I don't think I can add much beyond why couldn't a Muslim love his or her neighbor as themselves? I think that's totally reasonable. What Christ taught, that's actually a false statement. What the Gospels allege that a Christ might have taught or a Jesus might have taught, given that the earliest Gospel, Mark, was written full 4 decades after the supposed crucifixion and resurrection. There are no contemporary eyewitness reports of a Jesus Christ. The New Testament Gospels don't verify that there was even a Jesus, certainly not the God man. So, this idea that, well, what Jesus taught, I mean, I disagree with your present premise. In fact, the Gospels themselves disagree on how Jesus was born, how he lived, how he died, what he said, what he did. So I don't give really any. This is all kind of an empty calorie theological tap dance to me. What God wants, what Jesus says. And if I were to put 50 Anthonys in a room and have them discuss true Christianity, it would be Thunderdome. I mean, you'd agree with that, Anthony, right? The God who is not the author of confusion, has been so confusing that right now 2/3 of the planet worships somebody else or nobody at all. And if I was to take 50 people, true believers, who call themselves Christians, including you, and I put you guys in a room and I bought you lunch and I said, you hash it out, what are the chances all 50 of you would agree?
Zero, effectively.
The God who is not the author of confusion has a religion that has confused everybody in the room, right? Everybody's
Let me
going to
ask you a
claim.
question.
Go
Let me ask
ahead.
you a question. When a math teacher gives an exam, does everyone get the right answer?
Well, are you saying that someone getting an answer wrong means that there is a provable right answer or a demonstrable right answer? What I'm saying to you is that there is no demonstrating what Christ taught, because no one has ever demonstrated Christ. And even the books that talk about Christ are not contemporary reporting. These things came along well after the supposed events took place. This is all conjecture. This is just, for all we know, mythology. So your foundation falls apart. I can't build anything on it, Anthony.
Okay, so we would have to go into discussion about whether mythicism is true, which is not why I called in, but I feel like it's falsifiable.
No. I'm not talking about historicism or mythicism. There might have been a real guy named Jesus that the Christ story was based on, right? So, and I don't know if there was a real Jesus walking around doing his thing or not, but we can say there has never been demonstrated, and there's no evidence for the miracles of Christ. We can't verify that any of that shit went down, right? Whatever document we have is the Bible book, starting with 79 CE, and then moving into around the first century CE. And then you've got the church bodies who are casting votes to decide which of the books are worthy of becoming
Mhm.
canon. So now we're
Right.
voting on what the word of God is. And I've got a squillion people who are apologists or armchair apologists saying that no, let me explain true Christianity. There's just not much the rest of us are going to be able to do with that. Okay.
All right. Well, I want to say that, yeah, just think about what I said. We didn't really actually get too much into the topic I wanted to talk about, which is that modern Christianity the modern institutions don't actually follow what Jesus taught. And I just encourage people to understand that. And when you're rejecting Christianity, make sure investigate what it really is. And if you're
Well, you
really
should
rejecting its true
call into a Christian show to judge that, because we are not the that's an internal critique for you guys to sort out.
That's
Also,
true.
if
All
you
right.
come across
Oh, go ahead.
somebody in your circle who chooses not to love you, I hope you show them charity and a little bit of grace and humanity, and not operate with a punitive model that expects or demands suffering if someone doesn't love you in the way that you feel like you should be loved. Okay, Anthony?
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
And now I have to distance myself for a second. I don't think at no point was anyone voting for which books were in the New Testament. So I no, and your dates kept getting later and later, and Bart Ehrman knows I know you, so I gotta
I was thinking, I
adjust some of that.
think Mark was in the 70s CE, and that was the first gospel written, as I'm doing it from memory.
That's what a scholar who doesn't sign a statement of faith would say. Yes, but
I think
the canonization of the Bible was not never voted upon, so that wasn't one.
it was never voted upon.
Not as
Well,
not the
correct me.
canon was just the canon was the canon became accepted as it was more of an affirmation, but there was no like show of hand type situation where people were like, this
We're
is in or
talking,
this is
though,
out.
no, you're talking about a selection process, though. And we have Bible books, or supposed or alleged or ostensibly Bible books, that were not selected because they were not considered canon. So I would call that a selection process in my defense.
That's why I let it go when the caller was on. But then after, when we're doing our inside baseball things, then I'm just
just let me have it, Paul. Let me
all
have
right.
it.
You
Go
got it. You
ahead.
can have it. All right, fair
Come
enough.
after. I deserve it. Clarify the record. That's totally
But
fair.
Anthony,
Totally.
he gave us no reason to think Christianity was needed. Weirdly, he just demonstrated that we don't need it.
It's I think I had this conversation with Matt. People are like, well, that's not true Christianity. We're seeing this with the progressives who are standing against the Christian nationalists. And they're saying, well, those people who want to take over government and they want to make Christianity the law of the land and oppress the non-believer, etc., to dominate. The dominionists, that's not what Jesus taught. That's not true Christianity. But then you've got the Christian nationalist, fundamentalist hardliners, and they're looking at all what they consider to be wishy-washy moderates, and they're like, well, that's not true Christianity. And nobody can agree on what true Christianity is. And so I think to myself, well, maybe they're all Christianity. They call themselves Christianity. They're just different flavors. It's like, is there Dutch chocolate, German chocolate, something else? But this idea that one is not legit and the other is. And I really, really think that this giving Jesus a pass on commandments to compulsory love is what Christopher Hitchens used to call it. That's an offensive idea. I always say, love me or else is a domestic abuse model. And the idea that Anthony says, and if I don't love God, I am then deserving of suffering. I should suffer in some way. And the fact that he was just so kind of passive about it and so blithely accepting about it, that's a little disturbing to me.
To
I
the
have
extent
it
where he was willing
coming.
to extrapolate that to human children. It's like, oh yeah,
I
if
mean,
your
if you're
kids
not
don't
going to
love
love
you, they should.
me, it's not my fault. It's just one of those things. I gave you the chance. I opened the door. I said, come in and love me. And you didn't. So whether you get hit by a train or whether you get set on fire or you get palsy, I mean, yeah, whatever, you're going to suffer. You didn't love me. By the way, my love for you is unconditional and perfect and pure. And I am omnibenevolent. It's just crazy